Every year, approximately 5 million women in the United States become pregnant. And 1 million of those women experience the devastation of miscarriage. Another 20,000 women experience the excruciating pain of stillbirth, which is losing a pregnancy at 20 weeks or after. I've experienced both. And today, I want to share with you what losing 3 babies taught me about God. Hey y'all, welcome to the Nona Jones Show. Today, I want to tackle the unfortunately not talked about enough issue of pregnancy loss. In my opinion, I think it doesn't get talked about enough because there is just so much emotion around it, from shame to anger to discouragement. And, I've experienced both miscarriage, which is the loss of a pregnancy at less than 20 weeks. And I've also experienced stillbirth, having to give birth to my son, Daniel, at 20 weeks. And I've also walked alongside of friends who have experienced both miscarriage and stillbirth. And I got to tell you, there is very few pains like the loss of a baby. And so my hope is that by the end of this show, sharing my story will just help you feel seen and to receive hope for the future if this is something that you're navigating right now. So I want to start by just sharing when my husband and I started trying to have children. So my husband and I were married for about 5 years before we started trying to get pregnant. We spent the first 4 years of our marriage just having fun, getting to know each other, traveling, and just generally living life. And so when the 5-year mark came around, we decided, all right, we think we're in a good place now. Let's go ahead and start having children. Now, the thing that was interesting is I assumed, as I'm sure many people do, that all we would have to do is meet our biological responsibilities for the act of conception and that we would have a baby. But I would say about maybe 4 or 5 months into trying, we weren't making any progress. And, month after month, I was getting negative pregnancy tests and I was becoming more and more discouraged because, again, I just assumed that we would get pregnant. And so I told my husband that I thought it would be wise for us to go to a fertility specialist and, just have them maybe run some tests, see if there's anything wrong with either of us. And maybe they could provide some insight into what we were doing. Well, we went to a fertility specialist and I got diagnosed with infertility. I was told that I had a condition called polycystic ovarian syndrome, PCOS for short. I had never heard about it before, did not know what it was, but at the time, I was probably maybe 220 pounds, right? And I tell you this because the doctor told me that excess weight is oftentimes correlated with PCOS. And essentially what happens with PCOS is you do not ovulate, you do not release an egg. And so I was having my menstrual cycle, but it was not consistent. I would have, a cycle 1 month, maybe go, 2 months without having it, or maybe have it, 1 week and, 2 weeks later I would have it. It was just very inconsistent. And so I got diagnosed with PCOS, and I remember leaving that appointment and just feeling really shocked and discouraged because in my mind, again, pregnancy is natural. So how is it possible that I wasn't ovulating? Well, one of the good things about that appointment is the doctor said that there was a potential medicinal therapy that could be done to kind of, jumpstart my ovulation. But she said that losing weight would also potentially help with ovulation. And so left the appointment. She prescribed, I think it might have been metformin. I think that's what she prescribed. And, I went and got the prescription filled, and then, I went home. I think maybe like a week or two passed before I even took the medicine. And I just started to feel kind of strange, kind of off. Like I had these like weird sensations, kind of in my pelvic region. And, I had not taken the medicine, but I decided to just go get a pregnancy test just because of how I was feeling. And, the test came back positive, which was, of course, shocking because I had just had this infertility diagnosis. But then I get this positive pregnancy test. And so I was pleasantly surprised, pleasantly shocked. And I did what I think most, first time pregnant women do. I got really excited. I tried to figure out how to tell my husband in a way that would be like really exciting. And so I ran to a nearby gift shop. I bought like a little gift bag with some tissue paper, and I put the test in the bag with the tissue paper. And I think I like set it on the counter in the bathroom. And so when he came home from work that day, he walked in and he saw it and he was like, "What is this?" And he opened it, and then he, pulled out the test, and he looked at it, and he looked at me, and he looked back at the test, and he looked at me, and he was just like, You're pregnant?" And I was like, "Yeah." And so we were so excited. Like, oh man, over the moon excited. I think if you're watching this and you've ever experienced pregnancy under good conditions, of course, we know that there's pregnancy under duress, which is not ever good. But if you've experienced it under good conditions, there is no moment like the moment that you and your spouse get to celebrate that. And so we went to the doctor. We called the doctor, made an appointment to come back and said, "Hey, we got a positive pregnancy test." So we go to the doctor, and they did a quick ultrasound, and sure enough, there was not only a baby in there. There was not only a heartbeat. There were two heartbeats. There were two heartbeats, and I think she measured the babies at like around 6 weeks or something. So it was still early, but there were two very clear heartbeats. And so we left that appointment, y'all. We left the appointment. And I think at the time I had like a Nissan Altima, right? We left the appointment, y'all. We went straight to a car dealership and bought like a sports utility vehicle, like immediately. Because we were like, oh man, we're gonna have to have like 2 car seats, and we need all this space. And we already started talking about, them playing sports. They're both going to play sports. And we have to have a like trunk space for the equipment. And, I think one of the things that makes pregnancy loss so devastating is not just the physical loss. It's the loss of the memories that you make before the baby's even born. Like, we had already projected out that day. We had already projected out like sports, camps, family vacations, all these things. So anyway, we get this SUV, and the doctor made an appointment for a couple of weeks later, just to check and make sure everything was okay. Because I was considered a risky pregnancy because I had been diagnosed with PCOS. But we're like, whatever, we're gonna go back, everything's gonna be fine. It never, ever, 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 ever dawned on me to worry that something could go wrong. That thought never crossed my mind until we went back and she did the ultrasound, and we're sitting there looking at the screen like we're so excited to see our babies, and there was no heartbeat. There were no heartbeats. There's nothing. It was surreal. It was surreal because what's interesting, so I was a microbiology and cell science major in college. Love science, medicine, all of that. I love just the human body, and I understood the biology of conception. I understood the process. I understood what went into it, so much so that within the first maybe 2 months of us trying to get pregnant and it didn't happen, I started to track my ovulation cycles, like just this really scientific, rigorous method of pregnancy. But anyway, it was surreal because as much as I knew about conception, as much as I knew about the possibility of miscarriage, it never occurred to me that it could happen to me. Never. And at the time, I mean, it wasn't like, I don't remember being around a bunch of friends who were getting pregnant. I'm sure there were some, but it wasn't like this deluge of pregnancies or miscarriages, right? So I just didn't have that as a mental model. So anyway, we leave that appointment absolutely devastated because what we had planned to do is we were going to tell our families, my husband's family in particular, who we were in communication with, we were going to tell them after that appointment. We were going to actually take the ultrasound pictures and tell them about the pregnancy, and didn't happen. So we were devastated. We were very, very sad. But it's interesting. I think in my maybe first few weeks after that, in my grieving, I was grieving the loss of the pregnancy. I was grieving the babies. I was grieving, again, the memories that we had kind of made. And yet, in the midst of my grieving, something really interesting happened. Because, I prayed and I cried before God, like, Lord, why? Why would you let me get pregnant only to lose my babies? Like, why? And I heard the Lord very clearly say, Nona, even what you lost is proof of my power. And I remember when he said it, I heard it and it was confusing at first. But I meditated on it for like maybe 2 or 3 days, and then it hit me. I wasn't supposed to be able to get pregnant at all. And somehow, God had allowed me to get pregnant with twins. Obviously, I would have loved the miracle of carrying them to term and actually having my babies. But I had to acknowledge that the fact that I got pregnant at all was a miracle. And so I think when I had that recognition, because initially the experience shook my faith. I was just like, whoa, like, wait, I can get pregnant and lose my babies? Like, God, why would you do this? I think after God spoke that to me, I was like, oh, okay, God, you are God of the impossible. Like, just because the doctor said what cannot happen, that doesn't make it fact. That just makes it their educated opinion. And so I would say that that first miscarriage, initially it shook my faith, but then God's revelation in it strengthened my faith. And so never took the medicine. My husband and I, we started to try again. And within about a month, it wasn't long, within about a month, I had another positive pregnancy test. And I should say, for those who have experienced miscarriage, unfortunately, I, had the whole experience of having to essentially kind of deliver the babies. It was very, 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 very traumatic. But did that. And about a month later, another positive pregnancy test. And, it's funny. I wasn't afraid. And I've walked with women who have experienced multiple miscarriages. And, when you have that first miscarriage, it can shake your faith so that when you have the second pregnancy, you have the next pregnancy, you're like on eggshells, like you're trembling, like, oh my God, you go to every doctor's appointment. And you're like, I don't know if there's gonna be a heartbeat. Like, you're afraid. I wasn't afraid. I, of course, prayed for my baby. I prayed to deliver my baby. At the same time, I didn't have fear that I wouldn't. I trusted God with the outcome. I did. I trusted God with the outcome. So got pregnant, was really excited. We made it to the 12-week mark where we found out we were having a boy. And at that point, I think my husband was he was about to turn, this was 14 years ago. So he was about to turn maybe 30, 33 or something like that. And we decided that we were going to have a, pregnancy reveal party, but we were going to frame it as his birthday party. And so plan this birthday party. We get all the family over at the house, and we're having a great time with the birthdays. It was really sweet. So people come, they bring gifts to him, and we're having dinner, and it's his parents and brothers and sisters and cousins, and it was really nice. And so we get to a part in the party where I basically invite people to say kind words about my husband. And so, brothers and sisters, they say kind things, they bless him. It's so sweet. And, his mother gets up there, she says really sweet things. And then his father gets up there and, he blesses him and, he's talking about how awesome he is. Well, my husband then, he comes up after his father finishes talking. He comes up to him and he's like, Dad, and he brings his mom up. He says, Dad, Mom, the reality is, I would not be here if it wasn't for you. And I want to actually give you a gift to thank you for giving me the gift of life, And of course, his mom is like, oh, that's so sweet. And his dad is like, oh, that's so kind, son. And so he hands him the bag. I'm sitting on the couch and I'm watching. And they open up the bag and his dad's kind of, looking around in it. And I think we did like a card. There was nothing in there but a card. But I think we wrote a poem, and it was something like, I don't know, roses are red, violets are blue, I love you. But then it was something else to the effect of something that rhymed with gray, because then it said, I'll see you in May, love TJ. And he read it. His dad read it like 2 or 3 times. His mom caught it first, and she was like, like she went crazy. And then when she screamed, everybody else started screaming because they got it. And his dad just didn't get it. He was just like, see you in May, see you in May. Everybody's screaming around him. It was the best night. So that's November. Our son was due in May. I think he was due May 12th, 2010. That was in November, and everything's going great. Everything's going great. I had not morning sickness. I had all day sickness. Okay. But everything was going great. Fast forward to the morning of February 9th, 2010. So early morning, I'm talking about maybe 3:00 in the morning. I wake up and I just have this really weird sensation kind of in my pelvic region. And it's like, it just feels kind of tight. And I'm laying there, and it's like, it's tight, and then like it'll relax, but then it'll get tight again. And I was laying in the bed, and I woke up, and I could not get comfortable. I tried to switch sides. I couldn't get comfortable. I tried to sleep at the other side of the end of the bed. I couldn't get comfortable. So I got up and I walked out to our family room, and I just laid on the couch. And man, this pain was just getting progressively worse. I was like, what is going on? And then I start to get scared because I'm like, what is happening? Like this is something wrong with my baby. And so y'all, I grabbed my phone because this is my first like real pregnancy. I grabbed my phone and I just kind of typed in my symptoms in search. I was like, tightening kind of in my pelvis, then relaxed. Feels like it's like maybe every like 15 minutes or so. And the search comes back, labor contractions. And I was like, that's impossible. That can't be right. Like I'm only 26 weeks pregnant. Like that's not possible. So I just laid there. Now, the beauty of the situation is that morning at 8:00 a.m., I had a checkup. I had I think it was 6-month checkup or something like that. And so I already had an appointment with my doctor that morning. Now, here's what I decided to do. Because again, this is like 5:30 a.m., like 6:00 a.m. by now. I'm laying there in progressive pain. I laid there for about another hour or so. And then around 7:30, I got up and I could hardly walk. I made my way to my bedroom. And I was in tears. I was in so much pain. I was in tears. And I said to my husband, I said, Tim, something's wrong. And he was like, what do you mean? I said, I got to go to the doctor right now. And it wasn't quite 7:30. It must have been around 7, if that. I went in my bathroom and I was bent over crying. My husband was getting dressed, but he was moving way too slow. Like he was kind of taking his time, kind of checking himself out in the mirror, doing stuff. And I threw on my pants to the best of my ability and a shirt. And I said, I will see you at the hospital. I drove myself to the hospital. I was in so much pain that I pulled my car under the overhang. The hospital was only maybe 3-4 miles away, so not far. Pulled my car under the overhang, left it there, went up to, I think, the 4th floor where my doctor's office was. I went to the bathroom because I felt like I had to pee. And this may be kind of graphic, but there was blood everywhere. And so I went as quickly as I could to my doctor's office. And I told the receptionist, I said, I got to see my doctor. My appointment's at 8, but I got to see her now. She took one look at me and she said, go to labor and delivery. That was like 1 floor down. Went downstairs. I go in, they check me. The doctor said, ma'am, you are 9 centimeters dilated. You're having this baby right now. I freaked out. My son's 26 weeks. I knew that his lungs were not fully developed. I was like, this isn't good. This isn't right. My husband finally made it to the hospital. I was like, they were already changing me to go in to deliver the baby when he showed up. So he has to like throw on scrubs. I go in the OR. Don't have time for an epidural, nothing. Like, it's like the baby is coming out. So I deliver him. I heard a little squeak of a cry and they rushed him away. I didn't get to see the baby, nothing. He was gone. I said to my doctor made it down there. I said to my doctor, again, she was expecting me at 8. We were going to have a checkup. She just happened to be ready for me at 8 because I was going to have a checkup. We weren't planning to deliver the baby. But here's the divine providence of God. The week or two, maybe 2 weeks before I had that appointment, I had another checkup with her. She decided on a whim to do a test for the presence of, it's like just a swab to see if there's a presence of a particular type of hormone that signals that you could be at risk for delivering the baby. She did the test. The test came back positive. So she was like, you know what, just as a precaution, she said, I don't think this is an issue for you, but just as a precaution, let me give you a round of steroids just in case, just to make sure, you know, if anything were to happen, that the baby's lungs could kind of develop a little bit quicker. We had no idea that 2 weeks later I'd be delivering my baby. So have the baby. He gets rushed away. He's in incredibly fragile condition. The hospital we were at did not have, they had, a nursery, but they were not a neonatal intensive care unit. Because he was so early, so tiny, he needed to be rushed to a neonatal intensive care unit, specifically a level 3. That's the highest level you can get. So basically eventually they wheeled me into their nursery because they had dispatched for the NICU, the ambulance for the NICU to come get the baby. Thankfully, thank God, our city has a really amazing hospital in Shands Hospital. So they were able to, get the baby, transport him across town. But when I was wheeled into the nursery before they took him and I saw my baby, y'all, that is a sight I will never forget. He was so skinny, so thin. His skin was so thin. He had all types of just tubes and cords and everything around him. Like it was insane. My baby was like drowning in tubes and cords. But I saw him and I just asked the doctor, I said, is he going to be okay? And all she could say is, we're going to do everything we can. That's all she could say. She said, babies born this early have about a 50-50 chance. She said, I can promise you we're going to do absolutely everything we can. After that, they wheeled me to a hospital room. the emergency team, they came to get the baby. My husband left with the baby to go to the other hospital. And so I was in the hospital by myself, completely alone. Baby gone, husband gone. And all I had was the Lord. Really, all I had was the Lord. And of course, I had a lot of questions. Lord, why? What is going on? What's going to happen with my baby? But I prayed. I said, God, protect my baby. Protect my baby. I said, I know that these doctors are going to do the best that they can. I said, but you are the great physician. I need you to protect my baby. I think in terms of how that experience affected my faith, I don't think it shook my faith. I do think that it produced a new texture to my faith. And what I mean by that is, I knew that God could do the impossible, right? I knew he could do the impossible because my first miscarriage taught me that. Yet here I was in a situation where I had the baby. I had the baby. But he was not like out of the woods. He was in very fragile condition. So, I get discharged from the hospital I delivered him in. I race across town to the hospital he's at, go in there, and y'all, he was hospitalized for about 3.5 months. We had 3 death scares, specifically from, I did not, for whatever reason, I did not produce breast milk, at least not to the degree that he needed. And so we had to start giving him baby formula early. And the doctors told me, as a precaution, they were like, listen, you have to understand, his digestive system is very underdeveloped. And we have seen that sometimes in babies this small, that their digestive system cannot tolerate formula, and they can develop a sickness called necrotizing enterocolitis, NEC for short. And what NEC does is it can essentially perforate their bowels. And so what bowel perforation is like the bowel itself kind of opens, and the contents of the bowels then spill out into the rest of the system. And that's what creates sepsis. Sepsis is blood poisoning, and it goes throughout the circulatory system, and babies die of that. So they gave me that. I prayed against that. From day one. And he had a few situations where they thought he might have had NEC. I remember one time in particular, because I was at the hospital every day, all day, literally. I was there morning until I went to bed. I had to go home. You couldn't sleep in the hospital, but if I could have slept in the hospital, I would have. I was there all day. So I knew the nuances of my baby. I knew his vitals. I could tell if something was off with his blood pressure. I read his chart every day. So I understood what was happening with his health at a very granular level. And there was one day that I was in there with him, and I was looking at his vitals, and I noticed that his blood pressure was high, and I noticed that his pulse was erratic. It seemed like it was elevated, and it was kind of erratic. The rhythm was off. So I mentioned it to the attending physician, and he was just like, oh, it's no big deal. Like, he's just, small baby. It's no big deal. And I said, no, I'm telling you, something is wrong with my baby. And so shift change happened, and I had to leave. And so when I came back, shift change was about an hour. I came back, and there was an entire medical team surrounding my son's isolette. And the top, which was usually down, was lifted up. And everyone had a really concerned look on their face, because I noticed that it seemed like he was having labored breathing too. I noticed that his stomach was kind of distended, which meant it was kind of like, it was like there was air in it or something. And so they were all really concerned, and they said to me, listen, we're going to need to maybe do emergency surgery. We did some x-rays, and it looks like he may have some NEC going on. And we're concerned that there may be bowel perforation. I was like, what? So they prepared him for surgery. My husband and I went while that was happening, we walked the halls of the hospital just praying and crying out to God. And then, like as I'm recounting this, it's all coming back. About maybe an hour later, the nurse comes and gets us and she says, look, the good news is he doesn't have neck. We didn't have to do surgery, but we are going to keep a close eye on him. And, y'all, you talk about a praise party. Oh man, we were so grateful that God kept him even at that young age. My baby, my oldest, he ended up getting discharged on Mother's Day, 2010. So you talk about the best Mother's Day gift ever. He got discharged on Mother's Day. But he was in the hospital for 3.5 months. I think what his birth and hospitalization taught me about God is that God is in control. He's in control of the outcome. Whether it works out the way that we want it to or not, he's in control of the outcome. I thank God that he did what we asked him to do. We asked him to keep our son. But I found out I was pregnant again shortly after he was discharged from the hospital. And 20 weeks into that pregnancy, I started to have some really strange just sensations in my pelvic floor. Went to the doctor and they found out that my cervix had started to open. When I had my oldest son prematurely, we weren't sure why. We didn't know why. But with Daniel, with my third pregnancy, my cervix had started to open. And at that point, when they assessed me, they basically said, this is irreversible because the sac had started to peek through the opening. And they said, it's only a matter of time before your water breaks. And they said, we are very sorry to have to tell you this, but at 20 weeks, there is nothing we can do. Like the baby, even if we gave you steroids, that wouldn't help. The baby's just way too underdeveloped. Y'all, I prayed. I asked. I was like, hey, is there something we could do where maybe I spend the next 5 months upside down to keep the baby in? And the doctor said, there is a kind of, it's not really a procedure, but there is a methodology. I think he calls it like a reverse trundle where you kind of are elevated backwards. But he said, for you to be at this stage of pregnancy, for that to happen would be really difficult. That night, my water broke. And I had to deliver my baby. Had to deliver him. Had to see his little heart beating. Had to see his heart beating until it stopped. And that was so devastating. So devastating. Of course we prayed, like, Lord, we want our baby, we want our son to be healthy. But it didn't happen. It didn't happen. And I think I was definitely hurt, of course. I was hurt. But at the same time, I placed my faith in God. I said, God, you promise that you'll give me beauty for ashes. You promise you'll work all things together for my good. I don't know how you're going to do this, but I know you will. I don't know how you're going to make it good, but I know you will. And so through that, my faith, I wouldn't say it was shaken, but again, it received a new texture to it. Because now I've experienced a situation where I prayed for God to do something. He didn't do it. And I had to wrestle with that. Like, does that mean that I can't trust God? And the answer was, of course I can trust God. Of course I can trust him because he's good and he's faithful and he's kind. After losing that pregnancy, after losing Daniel, what the doctors learned is that the reason I had TJ prematurely is because I had incompetent cervix. So my cervix would just open as the weight of the baby pressed down on it. And so because of the knowledge from that, I was able to get a cerclage, which is just a cervical stitch, super simple procedure, painless procedure. I was able to get a cervical stitch, a cerclage, when I got pregnant with Isaac, who is my youngest son. I carried Isaac to term. He was 7 pounds, 15 ounces. Beautiful, beautiful, chunky little baby. And he was able to develop to term because of what we learned from losing Daniel. Something I have thought about is what would have happened if we had carried Daniel to, 25 weeks, 24 weeks, and we carry him to the point of viability outside of the womb. But maybe he had, debilitating, some sort of debilitating injuries or some sort of, defects in his organs or something like that. I've had friends have that experience, and it's devastating. And so I don't know what would have happened. Man, if I would have had him even with that, I would have loved my baby. I do trust, though, that God loves me. He loves Daniel more than I do. And so he loves me. And so I place my trust in that truth. And I just thank him for the knowledge that we gained. Even in that loss, we gained knowledge that allowed my youngest son to be born at term. So one of the things I wanted to share, just as I'm kind of sharing my story, is that when I look back over these losses and I think about what they taught me, I don't understand why I lost my babies. Don't know. I don't understand. But I do know that I will see them again in heaven. Like, my heart rejoices at the fact that when I get to heaven, I'm going to see all 3 of my babies. I'm going to see them. I'll get to know them. And I rejoice in that. That's what gives me hope. I also learned that God is faithful. I wasn't supposed to get pregnant at all, y'all. I wasn't supposed to get pregnant at all. I had 4 pregnancies, 5 babies. I have 2 sons on earth, God is faithful. Even in the tragedy, even in the loss, God is working. And so I hold fast to that. And if you have been navigating this, or if you've been walking through this, there's a few things I want to invite you to do. The first is, please comment and let me know. If you're watching this on YouTube, please comment and let me know how I can be praying for you, because there's a community of us who have experienced this. We're called angel moms, angel mom, because we have babies in heaven. There's a community of us who want to support each other, but we just don't know who all has been through this, because again, there's so much shame around it and just anger, and some people just want to move on. They don't want to talk about it. So let us know if this is something that you have experienced. I want to close with this verse. Isaiah 61:3 tells us that God will provide for those who grieve in Zion. He will provide for those who grieve in Zion. He will bestow on them a crown of beauty instead of ashes, the oil of joy instead of mourning, and a garment of praise instead of a spirit of despair. They will be called oaks of righteousness, a planting of the Lord for the display of his splendor. The thing that I've learned in all of this pain, all of this tragedy, is that God is faithful to his word. He has absolutely given me beauty for ashes. He has given me the oil of joy for mourning, a garment of praise for the spirit of despair. And the way that I've received all of this is through the ministry of sharing. I share these stories because I know that there are so many of you who have experienced this and you're feeling like you're alone. I remember after I had my first miscarriage, it was like all of a sudden everybody was pregnant. All of a sudden I got invited to all of these baby showers, and I remember being at those baby showers having to fight back tears. I even remember people asking, when are you gonna have a baby? When are you gonna give your husband a baby? As if I was holding out, and that wasn't the case at all. Like I wanted a baby. We were trying to have a baby. And people would even say that after I had lost our babies. I even had people tell me, because I've worn high heels for as long as I can remember. Back in like middle school, I was wearing high heels. I had people tell me, well, if you hadn't worn those high heels, you wouldn't have lost the babies. Like, what? Just super insensitive. And I'm sure these are well-meaning people, but man, the pain is real. And so I just want you to know, look, I see you. And I also want you to know, man, look, God loves you. He loves you when you're in your pain. He's there with you in it. He is not a God who is distant or separated from you. And I want to just pray. I'm going to close in prayer because I want to pray for you if you're carrying the grief of pregnancy loss. All right, I'm going to pray for you. Father, I pray that your daughter or your son who's watching this, who is carrying the weight, the heavy weight of losing their baby, I pray, God, that you will just do what your word says. Lord, give them that crown of beauty. Give them that oil of joy. Give them that garment of praise, Father. Give them something to smile about. I even pray, God, for the woman who is watching this, who has been diagnosed with infertility, who has been told that she cannot bear children or have children, Father. I pray for her in two ways. One, if it is the desire of her heart to give birth to a child, God, I pray that you will bless that you will honor that you will do the miraculous that only you can do. And I would also pray, God, that if it is your desire that she would be the mother of another woman's child, I pray, God, that you would place that desire in her heart. God, that she would want to adopt. God, I pray that if that is your will for her, that she would want to adopt, that she would be with a man, God, who would have the same heart, the same desire, Father, to expand their life through the gift of adoption. I think above all, God, I just pray that you will restore hope, be the lifter of their head, God. Give them joy and peace. Father, let them experience the goodness, taste and see the goodness of the joy of the Lord. I pray this and I declare this over them in Jesus' name. Amen. God bless you.